And welcome everybody to the PCS Like a Pro show. I'm your host, Megan Harless, as always, and I'm excited for y'all to join us today because we're going to be talking about a topic that many of our military families experience, a process many go through, and a lot of times it seems like it's a very daunting and scary process. But hopefully today we can shed some light and help make it a little easier for you and give you some good resources with what you need to know for that. Before we get into all of that, I just want to remind everybody we are in peak season and we've already started to see some crazy things happening out there. Just a reminder, if you are expecting to move in June and you have not had a moving company, a TSP assigned to your move yet, you want to reach out to your transportation office. More than likely, there's a good chance you may not be moving in June. We're seeing that a lot of locations are already backed up and booking into July. We're looking at mid-July, late July. A lot of people are already having to push and adjust their dates for that as well. So if you're thinking you're supposed to be moving in June and you haven't heard from anybody yet, reach out to that local transportation office. They can help advise you on the possibility of getting your June dates that you requested or what your next options are. As far as options, we're seeing that some families are having to either send their service member on and the family follow at a later date when a moving company can be secured. They're having to either put their items in storage and having the moving company pick up from there at a later time. Or if you're OCONUS, a lot of families are pivoting and switching to doing a PPM, personally procured move, to be able to move on their timeline when they need to. So again, if you're expecting to be moving soon and you haven't heard from anybody, there's no moving company assigned, reach out to your local transportation office and find out what's going on, what your situation is, and what you need to do from there. So we're going to just go ahead and dive right into today because, like I said, I'm really excited with what we're going to be talking about today. It's a lot of good, important information. So if you've got a family, you have an EFMP person within your family, go ahead, grab a notebook, grab some paper, grab a pen. You're going to want to take notes because it's going to give, hopefully, everything you need, or at least help make this process a little bit more easier for you. Today we have with us Jennifer and Rebekah. They're from EFM, Exceptional Families of the Military. So welcome, Jennifer and Rebekah. I'm so glad both of you can be here and join us today. So we'll start with you, Jennifer. Can you just take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself? And then Rebekah, if you can tell us about yourself as well.
Sure. I am Jennifer Bittner. I am an Army spouse. My husband is active duty. I should probably know how many years he's been in, but I can't think of that off the top of my head right now. I joined EFM last year due to the changes of the Autism Care Demonstration, and I wanted to know how to help advocate with those changes. And so currently I am serving as the Deputy Executive Director and lead researcher and co-chair for the Autism Family Advocacy Committee. And so, yeah, that is a little bit about me. I have 3 kids on EFMP right now. My youngest daughter just got on EFMP, and so we have been going through the hurdles. We're supposed to do PCS next year, and so just kind of going through the hurdles like everybody else. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I'm Rebekah Emerson. I'm the Executive Director of Exceptional Families of the Military. I am retired Air Force, and my husband is active duty Army. We're an EFMP family. I have 2 kids. One's 6 years old and one almost 5. And we are PCSing this summer, and I do not have a hauler assigned yet. So that comment was very true to what's going on in my life right now. The Packers are assigned, but not the hauler. And it's a pretty big PCS, and of course my husband is not here to help us out with it. So I'm loaning it. And I do want to talk a little bit about EFM and what we do. So we help EFMP families, and we do that by providing support groups. So we have a ton of support groups, and it's peer-to-peer advice for EFMP families. Some are location-based. Some are service-based. There's a big national one. There's an autism one. There's a Guard and Reserve one. So we try to cover all the bases with our groups. We also have case management services. So you can reach out to us and ask for help with humanitarian or compassionate reassignments, or maybe you just don't even know where to find forms at. We help out with that as well. And then the last thing we do is advocate on your behalf with DOD, DHA, and with legislators for policies that impact our families.
I was on mute. No, I appreciate you both being here and what both of you do, your team does, and your organization does for our community. So we know for families who are preparing for a PCS with an EFMP family member, what do they need to do to help kind of make that transition a little smoother in regards to like the medical side, the medical services that they've received?
I can go over just trying to find service providers. So the first thing I did when we got notification of this assignment was I went on the TRICARE directory to look for providers that my child needs. And I came up empty handed, to be honest. The provider directory is not 100% accurate. I wouldn't even say it's 50% accurate. So you, as an EFMP family, my advice is to do the legwork yourself, honestly. Call places. If you're on TRICARE Select, you can contact a TRICARE Select Navigator, which is a pilot program to try to help you. That's what I did, to try to help you find these providers. Interestingly enough, I did find a Mayo Clinic close by. And so for me personally, I was excited to find that. I called them, found out their wait lists and if they took TRICARE. But in general, as an EFMP family, it's important for you to do your own legwork on what is available. Jennifer, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sorry. It's kind of weird. Like I feel like I'm talking in a tunnel with, if anybody's wondering why I have blue headphones on, these are my kids. Like my kids hid my earbuds, and so I'm having to use their school headphones. 'Tis the life. No, I would say whenever, like for us being EFMP and knowing when we are gearing up for a PCS, we kind of try to anticipate the possibilities of where we're going, if that makes sense. And looking to see if that is even going to be a possibility. So, my husband, he'll come to me and be like, hey, like I could possibly move to these 3 or 4 places. Do you think the kids can receive their treatment, their therapies and everything there? And I will research the heck out of it, obviously, like everybody else does. And I'll say, yes, we can. No, we can't. And so he'll kind of prepare in the back of his head saying like, okay, I'll, if it's depending on how his PCS is going to go down, I guess you could say. So we kind of prepare in that manner, try to think ahead. I always try to think 10 steps ahead of the military or the army, if it's possible, just to either prepare ourselves for disappointment or, whatever. And then, so yeah, I do that for the medical side, just trying to prepare all of that. Also in my head too, I'm always thinking like, how far am I going to have to drive? What's going to be reasonable for my lifestyle? Because I work part-time, and so I feel like that needs to be taken into consideration as well, and that needs to be respected as well. And so my husband does try to convey that, like EFMP. Also, make sure that the medical updates for EFMP paperwork is updated as much as possible, because we actually kind of got hung up recently with our PCS next year. I wasn't keeping up on my end with my kids' medical EFMP paperwork. In my defense, when I talked to the PCM and I talked to the EFMP office, I told them, I was like, I would have been in your office every month. Trust me, you don't want to see me every month. I was not happy. I was not a happy person. It was a very, it's what we're going through is kind of emotionally draining. And it would have been very hard. And it was like, we would have been seeing one provider 1 month, and then I would have been possibly taking them off, and so, but just try to keep up with it as much as possible. And it's hard. It is hard. We get it, because all of our volunteers at EFM, I mean, like, all of us are connected to EFMP, whether it's like they're in, like, the volunteers enrolled themselves or our children are. So, like, fully get it. It's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't be like my family when you get your assignment and the notification from branch saying, we have you slotted for here, but it's going to be denied because your EFMP expires in 3 months. And knowing your EFMP should not be expiring in 3 months. Thankfully, it worked out for us. We got to keep it. It got updated in a timely manner, but definitely when you have those orders, getting that ball rolling, or knowing if you're going to be PCSing soon, or you should be PCSing soon, taking a look ahead of what needs to be done for that. We got several people joining us, just looking at the comments. We've got Carl here, who's one of our moving industry folks. And so I always appreciate the moving industry tuning in and learning more about what it is that our military community goes through and what life is like. I think it's a big added thing for them. We got Destin joining us in Germany. And then we've got Angela here. And for everybody else watching, we do have a couple of links posted in the comments. We've got the link for the EFM family support groups that you can join as well. And then also the EFM checklist as well, to help you kind of navigate through what it is that you need to know for everything. If you've got questions along the way as we go through this and we talk with Jennifer and Rebekah, please don't hesitate to drop them in the comments. Hopefully they can answer them. They're my expert people today. If not, I'm sure they will track down the answer or help connect you with whatever resource needs to be to help you find out what it is that you need to know. So please don't hesitate to drop those comments down there. So we talked about the medical side of things, but likewise, if it's like an educational thing, like an IEP or a 504 plan or something like that, like what should the family be doing on that side of the house in order to prepare for their move and the transition to the new schools?
I can start this off just a little bit. So my method to my madness is to find the school first. So I find the school and then try to rent or buy in the district that is appropriate for the school. I haven't been successful with base housing as far as wait lists are concerned, but I do always look on the base as well. And I like to tour the schools ahead of time just to see, is their special education program in line with FAPE? Is it something that I consider to be inclusive? Because my son has Down syndrome and I believe in mainstreaming. And even though it's the law, not everybody follows it. So I also take a look at the school and see how many complaints they may have open publicly, just to see how they have supported special education families in the past. And it's a very aggressive approach. I know. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Jennifer, but I will say you have to kind of stay on the ball about ESY as well. Because if, for example, we're moving this summer and I had to make sure everything was good with his IEP for the transition. And so he can start ESY in his new school right away, because I didn't want any gap in services.
So yeah, I'm going to actually add on to that. So I have 2 kids with IEPs. I have my oldest son. My two oldest children are autistic. One is in a gen ed classroom. Our middle son is in a self-contained classroom, and he has inclusion hours. And so what I've noticed the past year, and knowing we're moving next year, I've noticed I've been kind of gearing up for the next move for our PCS next year, meaning what's in my kids' IEP this year. I'm anticipating I want it to carry over to the next school, because whatever you take to the next school, they have to implement it until they do a new eval, or they until they implement new new I don't know why I want to say procedures, but procedures isn't the right word. You know what I mean? Until they go in and they are like, okay, well, we're going to change this resource time or, et cetera. And so anyways, and I actually kind of just got into a bit of a battle with my current school where my oldest son is at because he has a learning disability when it comes to reading, and they weren't listing it on his current IEP, and I was like, it needs to be on there, and they're like, well, we know it, like it's there, it's like we know it. And I was like, you don't understand, like we're a military family. I need it on the paperwork because I could potentially move to a new place and it's not on the paperwork. It doesn't help me because they're gonna be like, oh, we don't see it, and they could easily deny it. And it was kind of like a light bulb went off on their end, like, oh, okay, like you're right. We do need to include this. We need to include everything. And so when I really advise parents, because I get a lot of calls from parents in the community, or a lot of my friends are like, hey, will you talk to this parent, will you talk to this parent? And I always tell people, I'm like, don't back down, like know your rights, know what you need for your child, and advocate like none other in these meetings, and don't back down when you know that your child needs this, especially like Rebekah said, when it comes to ESY, because a lot of people, the school will tell you, oh no, like they didn't regress. Well, you can also go to ESY for emerging skills, and that's important to know for the next school year, for the next school. And so it's very important that you have every little thing documented. And like Rebekah said too, for the next school that you go to, depending, it could be good or it could be great. And I always look at impact aid too, like how much the school is receiving in impact aid, because I have a kid in a self-contained classroom, and I know that they're getting impact aid for that, for being a military child. And I don't know the ins and outs completely of impact aid, but I know if I kind of drop that in a conversation, like they're kind of like, ooh, like, oof, And so it's little things like that. Yeah.
I do want to add that we do have I usually do contact the school liaison officer as well, so to see what kind of information they have on the area, and especially special education information. And I do want to add that we are part of a larger EFMP coalition, and there's 2 organizations in there that specialize in special education, and that's Partners in Promise and Military Kids Special Education Alliance. That's Josephine Amato. She's your impact aid person if you want to know more about it. But just adding those resources, for individuals that may need it. And I'd also advise any kind of paper that you have. I don't know if you're a paper person or electronic person, but if it's anything to do with your IEP, or you have printouts of anything, medical records even, you should hand carry all that stuff with you. Do not let the movers packet any kind of binder that you've made. And also request your medical records 45 days out before you PCS.
Yes, no, good information there. Other things that can go into your PCS binder, PCS bag. And I've been very thankful the district that we're in now, as we are preparing our PCS away. When we had our meetings for my son's IEP, one of them has an IEP, one has a 504. But when we met with them to go over everything, because I was like, we're getting ready to move, like I need to know these things are good. And the folks that were in the meeting with us are just like, we think he could do without this. We've seen that he's done well without it and everything. They're like, but we're going to leave it in there and let this just be a robust thing so it carries over, and we'll let he can have the transition with his accommodations he's used to, and let the next school evaluate when they do their reassessment of things. So I was kind of thankful they were just like, I didn't have to be the one saying, I want to leave those in there, and this is why, because we're moving and transitioning, that they were already like, we think he can go without him, but we're going to leave him because we want that transition to be smooth with what he already knows and whatnot. So for me, I was at least thankful the school was kind of on board with that. Kind of switching gears a little bit, talking about OCONUS moves. We hear a lot about with OCONUS moves about families getting held up in the moving process because of EFMP screening. And that can sometimes take a long time. The offices get backed up with processing things, or they're being required to enroll in something that they have not needed services with before, which holds up everything with that. So how can families navigate that piece when they get those OCONUS orders and they're trying to move and it's being held up and they're just like, are we going to Germany? Are we not going to Germany? My household goods are getting packed on Friday. Like, are they going to be shipped to Germany? Do they stay? Like, how, but the EFMP side of the house and that screening process, how can they navigate that?
Well, Megan, it's very difficult. And I would like to add a wrinkle to your question, because the Air Force and Space Force started screening 100% for PCS moves.
Interesting.
Yes, very interesting. It's caused a lot of backlog and a lot of issues, quite frankly, within the electronic processes that the Air Force and Space Force recently implemented. Also, looking ahead, the Army is also, we do know that the Army is looking at that as well. So if you're going to be doing 100% screening, like you were only doing overseas screening, you're going to catch a lot more diagnoses, right? So my advice on this, to head off those pain points that you just mentioned, was if you have a diagnosis and you think it's a qualifying one, you need to go ahead and see if that qualifies you for EFMP and enroll in it. It's a mandatory program, because if you wait until the last minute and they're looking at your medical records and they see something that qualifies and you have to start the process from that point, it's going to delay. It's going to delay things on your PCS. But there is, Military One Source does have a bunch of checklists on there for EFMP families that are helpful. We also have some binder stuff on our website, but in general, you have to take responsibility for keeping up on this stuff yourself. In my opinion, it shouldn't be that way, but that's the way that I feel like it is. Jennifer, I don't know if you have anything.
For OCONUS moves, I mean, for us, I think as soon as our kids got into EFMP in 2017, I think it, like my husband and I, we sat down and it was just kind of like, it's not going to happen. You know, let's just not try, which sounds like not fun, but because, you know, we spent a couple weeks over like in the Netherlands when I was in grad school. It was part of my grad program. And I mean, we had a blast. It was so much fun and so we really wanted to go overseas, and that was pre-kids, but you know, and then we had kids and they got enrolled in EFMP, and it's just kind of one of those things. I feel like I have to really look at it and think like, this is what I need medical wise or mental health wise. Can this realistically be met overseas? Because the overseas care is different than, you know, here in the United States. There's a lot of, we get these questions a lot in our support groups, our family support groups and our individual support groups and stuff. And it's very frustrating for families. You know, they're like, I haven't been seen by this provider in 3 years, like, or I only have to see them once a year. There's a provider in the economy, or, you know, those kind of things. Like, they can take me, and and they have to kind of look at it as the military, I think, looks at it as what if you get overseas and something happens and all of a sudden you need these providers, and unfortunately you would have to scramble to come back. And so I think that's always in the back of their minds, or in the commander's mind, if it's a command sponsorship or something. That's a lot of responsibility. You know, I remember, my husband will probably watch this and be like, but like, you know, there was kind of some conversations when he was a company commander where he told some soldiers, he's like, I'm responsible for you. Like, at the end of the day, like, I'm responsible for you and your mental health and like your physical health. Like, that's on me. And like, you may not realize that because you're adults, but I'm responsible for you. And and I always remember that, like when it's just like, oh, I don't know. Also too, for other people that may not know this, I was a practicing therapist, so I'm in some mental health provider groups, but a lot of mental health providers that are overseas are kind of saying like, hey, look, like there's a shortage in the United States for mental health, and there's a shortage over here overseas. Like, our purpose here is to serve the people that get diagnosed or encounter problems like while they're already here. We just don't have the capacity to welcome, unfortunately, incoming families that could need help, if that makes sense. And so it could be difficult. And each branch is different too. The forms are different. I heard somebody say like, oh, we're not using this form. And then I was looking through my own EFMP paperwork, and I was like, oh, this is the form that I have. Oh no. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I like to add to that, having spent a lot of time overseas, this is before I gave birth to my son, Winston, but the medical care is very, very different. And there's also some cultural aspects too, that you may want to look at for when it comes to disabilities, whether it's accepted in that society or not, because that might impact, what resources may be available, because things can be quite different. And Jennifer's right on, like, ultimately the government doesn't want to bring you over somewhere and then have to pay to bring you back.
Yeah, gets expensive that way. So is there a chance that so if you have, if you're in EFMP for whatever reason, there is a chance some folks with an EFMP dependent are able to go OCONUS with that EFMP dependent, correct? It's not just if you're EFMP, you're denied across the board OCONUS. We do have families that are OCONUS, so it's not a lost shot to get OCONUS if you have an EFMP family member.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. Sorry.
I think there's always I think there's always that caveat, because even then, like, I was answering some of these questions yesterday, and I think a family support group, and I even told the person, I was like, in an hour you could get an answer where a person said, because I think one of the questions you had asked us, like, the appeals process or something like that. Like, some people say there is no appeals process. Sorry if I'm jumping ahead. Or you wait this many weeks or something like that. And each is different. It depends, I think, on the situation, the branch, all of it. There's all sorts of different caveats. I think what is it, Rebecca? Is it 5 years or something? You have to go like without the specialist, without the treatment for 5 years. And then it's like, then you can be even taken off EFMP or something. And again, I could be incorrect. Some people could come back and say like, oh, I was taken off EFMP in 2 years. And I'd be like, oh, that's
what
awesome.
You need is the doctor saying you no longer need that. So like, for example, my son just got heart healthy, right? So he had 2 holes in his heart and they closed on their own. It took a long time, but I finally got that off of our EFMP packet. And what I needed to do to get that, of course, he has many other diagnoses, but let's say that was the only one. And that was the only thing that was enrolling us in EFMP. Like, the doctor saying that he no longer needs care from a pediatric cardiologist is what got that off of my package. So it could be problematic if it's something that you're not aware of, maybe that they find, or it's old and you just never did that follow-up and you say, well, I don't need this anymore, I don't go there. In order to update it, you do need a doctor to do that. And then the mental health is the 5-year one. And then
So with that, no, you're all good. So with that, like you said, there is an appeals process you can go through. What if like that person is able to show, that their OCONUS location, they're being denied, say they're going to Germany, they're being denied that location because services aren't available, but that family is able to show that services are available in one form or another, or that their current provider say it's a mental health thing, and the current provider is saying, I can do telehealth appointments with you, so we can make it work. Like, is that possible? Like, what happens if they're able to show like services are available even though you're denying me?
So that's what I had to do, honestly, with the stateside assignment. And what I did was I gave the information to the Met. We are Army family, so this differs by branch, but whoever the medical decision authority is within your branch of service, your branch of service. So like I gave the information to the MedCom POC and said, look, this is available here. And so they could take that into account. So that's one method of providing that information to kind of give them the full picture on what is available.
Mental health wise, like telehealth, it depends on the therapist license, what state they're in, where the location of the client is, because you're not supposed to cross state lines, essentially. And so from my knowledge, and somebody can correct me, that's totally cool. I'm fine with that. So please let me know. But no, I smiled earlier because Rebecca literally was like, hey, can you talk about that? Yeah, sure. Like as you were saying it. And so yeah, but overseas wise, I'm pretty sure I'm seeing that you can't do telehealth. Like you can't do telehealth. Like if your therapist or whoever is in the States and you're going and you want to go to Japan or you want to go to Germany or Italy or something like that, like there's not like telehealth, I don't think will be able to serve you. If somebody else has different news, please share. I would honestly love to know that. So, and I do believe, Rebecca, like TRICARE just came out with new telehealth guidelines or something, and I think we're going through it all, right? Like we legitimately had kind of a conversation. All of us had a conversation about this, and we were like, oh, we need to go through the guidelines to update families on it, and so that is in the works right now. So but
it is dependent on the state licensing.
Yeah.
So TRICARE says, yes, you can do this, which is great, but the state's license still has to agree. And sometimes it doesn't work out and sometimes it does. Like I was still able to do it between North Carolina and Virginia because they had the same licensing or something. I don't know. Didn't really understand it, but they were able to do it. I just want to add that, of course, not everything is fixable. So Megan asked, well, who do you tell? Well, sometimes, your comments may fall on deaf ears. And so I just want to share, a story from our founder, Austin, who actually, she was very public on this story. So I know I can share it because it was covered by CBS Nora O'Donnell. But she was actually denied by the medical folks on a PCS for a member of her family. EFMP denied. They said, we do not have the medical care here. And the Army overrode that and sent them anyway. Bad stuff can happen sometimes. We don't want that to happen to anybody ever. So, try everything, your chain of command, the hospital, the detailer, that's the Army term, but like whoever your assignment person is. And ultimately, though, you can reach out to your congressional representative if you're not able to rectify things through the chain of command if a dire situation like that happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For those that haven't seen Austin's story, it was floating around social media a little bit ago, but we'll get the link for it and we'll drop it in the comments so you guys can go and take a look at it because it really is a very touching and moving story. And I'm very glad and excited to see that Austin was willing and able to speak up and to get things, they're kind of handled for that. So for families that are having issues through this EFMP process, who can they reach out to for help and assistance to navigate through whatever their issue may be?
We recently had issues, not to scare you since you're about to Move my way, Megan. Feel bad. And anybody else that's watching that might be heading this way to lovely Fort Leavenworth. It's a great town. Like, I'm not going to lie. I love it here. But I recently had issues with the on-post clinic because when you're prime, you have to be on post here because it's small. And I had some issues with the EFMP process, and our pediatrician retired and nobody told us. They still really haven't officially told us or assigned us a new one. And so I just went straight to patient advocacy for me. And so that's how we're kind of handling things, like, but we're smaller base. Obviously Leavenworth is really small. So it's like, you go downstairs from your doctor's appointment and like you can literally walk into a patient advocacy. Whereas like, I remember when we were at Fort Bragg, we were moving during 2020, like COVID shut down. I'm sure you, Megan, you knew the stop move happened. And it was like, we're all like, we're moving. And the Army's like, the heck you are, and it's so, we tried to move, and actually Brandy, like my husband tried to go clear EFMP to move. And they're like, oh no, like, you can't move because your kid's stuff, EFMP isn't updated. Nope, you're not leaving. And Randy was just like, I'm sorry, but you're going to sign this paperwork because like, I'm leaving one way or another. Either I'm getting an exception to policy or you're going to sign and you're going to write on here that I'm going to update it as soon as I get to Fort Leavenworth. He's like, and so it's hard. But for us, like here at a smaller one, like we were able to go to patient advocacy and we're getting everything taken care of. I think at Fort Bragg, we probably did have to go to patient advocacy a couple times personally. Rebekah, what about you? Have you, I've known a couple people to file ICE complaints.
I mean, that is another avenue for sure. In my opinion, it differs wildly between branch of service, officer and enlisted. I know in the Air Force, the assignments are pretty different between officer and enlisted. So sometimes something, that's why I like the peer-to-peer support groups, because if you say something, you think it applies to everyone, but it's not that easy for everyone. Like in my mind, as an Air Force officer, I'm like, oh, I just call my assignment guy and talk through the issue. I'm trying to solve that same issue for an Air Force enlisted family. This is when I was active, and it's just not that simple. There's a lot more red tape involved. So I can say it's pretty difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Jennifer, knowing where we're going and having been there before and hearing how the clinic on post has really changed from the last time we were there to where we are now, we've already got the decision that we're probably going to go select. Just that way we can be off post and not have to deal with the waiting 3 months for a sick appointment that the rumors I'm hearing from there. So as we begin to wrap up for today, like what else do families need to know about in regards to EFMP and PCSing, or with your organization, that they don't already know about or that we haven't already talked about today?
As far as PCSing wise, medical equipment, your medical equipment, Rebekah, did you want to
Sure.
more on that?
Some people don't know this, but you can apply for a waiver for the weight associated with that medical equipment. So according to the JTR, for medical equipment to qualify for shipment, an appropriate uniform services healthcare provider must certify that the equipment is necessary for medical treatment. So that's reading straight out of the regulation. I just want EFMP families to know that you can do this, right? They might not know. And it's important to connect with your mover and let them know about this stuff as well. Whoever your carrier is, whoever your government rep is, let them know that you have all these medical equipments, because some of it can be very expensive and hard to package. Maybe it has to be taken apart by a specialist. I mean, there's so many things that can happen. Medical beds, for example, can be very high value.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We enjoy regulations over on my side of the house because it's right there in black and white, especially for our movers that may or may not be aware of what the regulations say, depending on how many military shipments they do and what their experience has been with military shipments. So the JTR Chapter 5 is an amazing regulation that everybody should take time to read through. It's lengthy, I know, but there's a lot of good information in there. And so I think between my group and EFM's groups, as far as getting medical equipment moved for you, we can probably help you get that piece handled.
Yeah, especially if they need to go to their PCM to get like letters written saying like, yes, this is medically necessary. This needs to be, documented in this way for their move. When we were at Bragg, it was actually my kid's physical therapist that was like, oh yeah, I've written letters for, people to go over their allotted weight because of physical therapy equipment and stuff. And I was just like, my mind was blown. I was like, what? That happens? I mean, it's just, she's like, oh yeah. And I was like, this is amazing. So,
brand new information.
Yeah. Right. So I thought it was amazing. Like, so.
I also I like to communicate with the government as well, like the government transportation office, as well as the carrier, everybody that I can, that my son has special needs. This may not be for everybody, but I like to make some things known up front just to make the whole process go by a little bit easier. And so they're aware of some of the dangers associated with that may not be typical when they're packing out a neurotypical family, right? So I'm very open about it, though. I know not everybody is like that. Also being open to them about, COVID protections, if you are still at high risk for that, being upfront with the carrier, because, a lot of people have stopped wearing masks, or I'm saying, I need this in my house still, and also for ADA housing, when you move, like if you require ADA housing, you want to start thinking about that early, and you need a letter from your PCM, asking for that if you need any reasonable accommodations. Also, start thinking about that stuff, because that all needs to be submitted when you get on the wait list for housing.
We have it on my daughter's EFM paperwork most recently because she's having some like asthma, breathing issues, and we can't figure out why. And so recently her PCM has put in her EFMP paperwork, like, she must have hardwood floors. So if we were to move on to base housing or something, like, that's kind of a hard stop for us. So
yeah, no, absolutely, some good points.
And we do, and if families have question about, accessing all that, we do have other groups and stuff that can help them with ADA housing and all of that. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I think housing is one of the things we think of, and then sometimes we don't think of it because we focus on all the other things, making sure services continue, making sure the schools have the accommodations. And then at the end of the day, it's like, oh yes, we need a place to live as well. That sometimes it becomes...
Or there's the expectation, like, y'all should be grateful. You get housing, you get this free housing or whatever. And it's just like, no, like, just because we get free housing we need good housing. So, and we know people to help with that as well. So,
and that the good people is AFHA. So we'll drop the link, Armed Forces Housing Advocates. So there's something on their website. You can fill out a form to get their assistance if you need assistance with ADA housing.
Well, we are going to drop that link here into the comments for everybody to go check out as well for that. So I just want to thank you both for taking time out of your days to be here and to help share this information with families and help us shine some light onto what it is our communities experience and kind of how to navigate that process. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having us. And
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. We're excited that you're highlighting EFMP families. Thank you so much, because it's sometimes it's hard for our voices to get heard. So, I mean, this is really big for us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime that you guys have new information that comes out and policies change and you want to make sure people know it, you guys are always welcome back on the show to have your spot to share what needs to be shared with the world. So I've really enjoyed how this, and it's been very enlightening for me because for us, we only have our children. 2 of them are EFMP for educational needs, not medical. And so hearing some of the medical side of things has been very eye-opening and enlightening for me to understand how that process is similar, but kind of also different from the side of the house that I know with just educational stuff. So it's been very nice to be able to hear and to know that information, be able to pass it on to others. So thank you so much for that. Everybody else that's been watching, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we have helped shed some light on what you need to know for PCSing with EFMP and giving you some good resources from EFM on how to navigate any situation that you may be going through. Join us again here next week, same time, same place. We're going to be talking about some PCS tips and tricks and hacks and lessons learned along the way, things that you need to know to kind of get through what this crazy PCS season is about. So join us then. Until then, you all enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, enjoy the rest of your week. And if you are PCSing like me, hopefully, fingers crossed, praying for you that it goes smoothly and that PCS Murphy stays away and does not come back to visit my house anymore until forever. But until next week, we will see you all then.